going into counseling here. There's the I don't have a mic, so I don't know what I'm doing. All right, that's our starting pitch, everyone. I'm scared to talk because I feel like feedback's going to get worse and worse.
It's a sign.
It's a sign that God is listening. By the way, thank Brian when he comes back because he just raced in there to go figure it out. Okay, now it's just that high pitch. I'm sorry. I will try in a moment.
You went 4 years, you went everywhere. I don't have a mic, and I'm like,
Yay. Okay. All right, I think we're good. Although now I'm hearing like reverb, so. My class isn't that bad. Someone's trying to shut my class up. Okay, I will try to talk. But basically, we had one of those events. And I mean, knowledge-wise, we know God's there, but anyone else ever feel emotionally that he's distant? Right? I think we follow that it's I would unplug it if I knew where the plug was. Everyone else hears that, right? That's just not me tinnitus. Okay, I was like, everyone's looking at me like, what is wrong with you, Josh?
oop, other way. There you go.
I did not even know that. I did not even know that was there. Thank you. We're over here suffering, and I didn't even know that was. I thought that was like a temperature control or something. Way to go. Hey, look, real heroes. Real heroes.
They're working on. They said new audio system, so I didn't know.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I did not know there was a volume control here, so we got it figured out in here. Okay, I say all that. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going. When are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I was just saying, like, we've gone through that, and And so we see this come up, and God had a hand in all of history, and by the way, continues to have a hand in all of history. What's interesting, and we alluded to this, maybe we explained it, I don't remember last week, but Babylon, like many other ancient Near Eastern countries, when they captured people, they didn't just capture them. They attempted to assimilate them, to rewrite who they were, to re-impress upon them new copies, if you will, of themselves. And they would begin often with the symbols of religious dominance. They would make a theological statement. So notice it says, he gave into his hands, and look what it says, and where to go? He took the vessels of the house of God and brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of God, of his God. Sorry, I didn't mean to capitalize that when I was typing. You guys know that's not like the God, right? Anyway, and then he placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. This is a theological statement. What would that theological statement probably be? Same struggle theologically that's going on in Exodus with Pharaoh, by the way. It's whose God is the God? Whose God is the God? They would do this because they believed that their God gave them the victory. So we're going to take the vessels from the house of Yahweh, we're going to put it in the temple of our God, and that shows that our God is superior. It doesn't mean that Yahweh doesn't exist. It's that the God Baal, the God of Babylon, is superior. Isn't it interesting how they misread this completely? And so they would make this. But what's interesting, this is a... Have you ever thought about how depressing of a way this is to start a book of the Bible? Have anyone ever thought about it? This is a depressing way to start. You're reading Daniel. Wait, I'm going to read about this great person named Daniel, apparently. Imagine never reading this before. And then how does it start out? There was a king, and there was another king, and the king lays siege to the city. The king destroys the city, and he takes with it the vessels of the house of that city's God and puts them in his own. Right? Oh, man, I'm already depressed thinking about it. But that's if we don't know, going back to the theme, that the whole book is about the sovereignty of God. About God's being in control no matter what it looks like, no matter what is going on. And then anyone, land of Shinar, what does that make you think of?
Sinai.
Huh?
Sinai? I don't know.
Not quite. Do you guys remember where we first see Shinar? It's in Genesis. I'll give you a hint.
Babylon.
So Shinar is synonymous with Babylon.
The Tower.
Tower. Yes. Tower of Babel. Yeah. If you look in Genesis, we're going to go to Genesis because this is really interesting. Genesis 11. So in Genesis 11, verse 1 and 2, the whole earth had one language and same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And then we hopefully know what took place after that, right? We said, sure, here, let's do this. So what's really interesting, the Tower of Babel, some were built, some people say it was in the city of Babylon, some people believe it was elsewhere in the area. But Babylon and Babel both have the same root, Akkadian word, and that word is the gate of the gods, is what it means, Babili. Which is interesting because it shows their striving, right? And how they view themselves. And it shows, like, again, that they have all of this desire. But again, Doesn't matter human desire. What happened with Tower of Babel? God said, no, no, no. I'm God. I'm in control, right? What happens here? God says, no, no, no. I'm in control. Even if it looks like everything has fallen, even if it looks like Jerusalem is done for, I'm in control. We see over and over again this historical and this theological point that historically, no matter what happens, God is orchestrating. God is up there. God may not be the one that creates the issue, but God can certainly use the issue, right? Remember that verse? God works all things for the good. Yes. I don't know why, almost quoted a Genesis, but God works all things for the good. Doesn't mean that God creates every event and happen, right? If you go sin, God did not direct you to sin. But God could use that, right? God did not direct Jehoiakim, or God did not direct Nebuchadnezzar to go and destroy Jerusalem. But God sure as well chose to use that, right? For his purposes. And so this goes with that sovereignty. So here's the point that we get in the first couple of verses here is, I already said all this. Isaiah prophesied about that. Sorry, I forgot I had a slide here. Jeremiah and Deuteronomy both warned of consequences of disobedience, and then we already talked about land of Shinar. I guess I could have given you this hint if I would have remembered I had a thing here, slide. Here's the key takeaway for this first couple of verses. God is sovereign in every season, especially every season of chaos. God is sovereign. God's hand is more powerful than whatever we're finding ourselves in. And then we get into, not only is God sovereign, but those who are faithful to God, especially under cultural pressure, we see, like Daniel and his friends will be, those who are faithful to God become victorious. Look with me in Daniel 1, verse 3 here. Daniel 1 in verse 3, if I can find it here. Yep. So, what time do we have? Okay. I'm going to let you read this. But basically what happens, what's the story that goes on, right, is they're all sitting down. They're all supposed to be taken from the land. So they look for, right, the king, I'm going to read my summary statement here. The king commanded Ashpenaz to bring both the royal family and the nobility, youth without blemish, of good appearance, skillful. Look at this, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and learning, and who are competent. I just answered the question I was going to ask, but we're running low on time here. To stand in the king's palace. Do you guys know in Scripture when it says to stand in the palace or to stand before the king, that's the idea of to serve the king. And so there are specific
he starts, first thing out of his mouth when he's talking to his disciples, blessed are the poor in spirit, humility.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me say this, because we're going to end with this, and then we'll touch the last two as we combine it with next chapter. I put a quote on here, and I don't remember where I got this, but I love this. Faithfulness doesn't need to be loud in order to be bold. I think that's important. Were you going to say something like?
Yeah, 1 Peter 3:15 about sharing your faith uses gentleness and
Yeah.
respect in that.
Absolutely. That's a good one. Yeah, faithfulness doesn't need to be loud to be bold. So far, there's a theme here, sovereignty and faith, right? But as we're faithful, as we're trusting in the sovereign God, we got to be humble and we got to be wise in how we did it. And I wish I remembered what I was going with when that squirrel popped in my head about yesterday, but it obviously wasn't real key to it. But hopefully this is helpful. Go, be humble, be wise, and be faithful this week. Thank y'all, and we'll get into finishing out chapter 1 and chapter 2 next week.
Thank you, John.
Take away from verse 16. The stewards took away the food from mine and gave the vegetables. They looked better.